beverage ready to talk
I
about Barbie.
know. My house is cold, so this is making me feel cozier.
Well, that's good. That's good. Um, are you cozy enough to put on your iridescent rollerblades? And now we'll talk about that in a minute. For those of you who are joining us for the first time or as a refresher, please keep your audio on mute unless you are asking a question. You will know it is your turn to ask a question because I will call on you by name. How will I know to call on you? Because you will use the handy raise hand feature, and I will see that you've raised your hand on my screen here, and I will call on you by name. And at that point, you can ask your question, make your comment, what have you. But then please go back on mute while Jennifer and I respond, and we'll go from there. If folks have more than one comment, we'll get through everyone first time who wants to say something, and then we'll go back to folks for their second turn. In addition, we have the chat. Please feel free to use the chat to just put an opinion out there or introduce yourself if you're joining us from somewhere outside of the greater Philadelphia area, or just to introduce yourself if this is the first time you're joining one of our discussions, which we have not quite every month, but we have many months. And we'll tell you at the end how to find out when the next one is. With that, I see we have a bunch of people in here, but we don't have any hands up yet. So let's see. I wonder if none of our regulars are here yet, if that's the problem.
And don't people usually come into this thing with their hands raised?
They do.
I
It's usually like a race to
yeah.
see who can get their hand up first. But maybe you answered all their questions in your intro.
Yes, that's
And
possible.
they're just here to be polite or to say thank you. Maybe that's it.
That could be an early ending discussion in that case.
That's true. We would. Okay, well, we don't have any questions yet. People haven't raised their hands yet, but I'm going to start with a question that I think will probably come up. I feel reasonably confident someone will ask this, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, Jennifer. That is the so-called Oscar snubs of director Greta Gerwig and lead actor Margot Robbie. Do you have thoughts on that?
Do you want to start with the most controversial thing, Andrew? Is that your goal right now? Like to just get it all out there?
Well, I don't know.
If you want me to
I
make a
don't.
super controversial statement, I can totally do that. I think this movie was a very useful film for American cinema. I'm happy that it brought people back to the theaters. I think it's fun. I had a good time watching it the first time. I'm not convinced this is the greatest movie ever made, so I don't know that I want to call it a snub. How about you?
I. It's so funny because I thought that I would be the only person on this Zoom who had that roughly same opinion, and that I would have to force myself to keep my opinion to myself, lest I be virtually stoned for my thoughts. But I kind of completely agree with you. I think there are impressive things about the movie, but I think it I think the way in which it was God's gift to cinema was in its bringing people to cinemas,
Me too.
and beyond that, it is not all that impressive.
All right, who wants to fight us? Come on, somebody.
Yeah, seriously, we've got over 20 people on here, and up there we go,
Somebody wants to.
Steve.
Good.
All right, Steve, go ahead.
Well, I saw it the second day it opened at BMFI, and I was absolutely mesmerized. I thought it was just a fun ride. The beginning took me back by surprise. Of course, we all knew the music. That started out with the tall woman and the breaking of the little dolls. I thought it was really cute. I'm not, and I realized over time everybody was picking on it, and they found all the faults with it. But if you take it for what it was, and that's the way I really approached it, especially in retrospect, it was just really fun to watch. She was fantastic. She's been great in many movies, and she topped herself. I thought, well, actually, she's been good in a lot of movies, but I thought she showed her diversity in some of the other movies she played in, where she was way out in left field. And this movie, where she really, I thought, brought it all together as the persona she was trying to play. So I was surprised that there was so much negative reaction to it. I guess if you start dissecting the movie and you start saying, okay, well, it was more towards women's liberation, and Ted Cruz went crazy about that, which really annoyed me. Annoys
Yeah.
me. Right? Okay, so, that was kind of interesting approach, but certainly unnecessary to take a movie which was meant to be just a fun ride and chop into little pieces. And other people criticized the board of directors, which was all men, and then and it turned out that it's really in current times it's half female and half male. So you started picking it apart after it came out, but the people that saw it in the beginning just took it for what it was. I thought I really enjoyed it, and my wife didn't feel quite the same way. So maybe that was part of it. But I thought it was a fun ride. So
I
that
completely, yeah.
and I think she deserved the award because she played a very unusual role and pulled it off. She really pulled it off beautifully. I was so surprised with all the other people up there, that she wasn't awarded, she wasn't given the opportunity to have the Academy Award. Okay, that's my thought. Just thought I'd
Well,
share.
thanks very much, Steve. We appreciate the feedback, and it sounds like basically we've heard from Steve. We've got Susan in the comments who says she thinks it was, she liked it, but it wasn't great, and it was overhyped and marketed to generate buzz. So I think so far it's looking like our headline is this is sort of one of those this is like a dog bites man thing. Like, we assumed everyone would think we were going to be appalling, but we're actually, I guess it's man bites dog, if that were a headline, because that's what always happens. But people thought I thought that our opinions would be viewed as heresy, but so far they're not. So let's see if any of the hands that have come up since disagree with us. John, you're next.
Hello, I'm a 72-year-old man. My sister had her first Barbie doll when she almost first came out. I would look at her and sort of scoff at her on the steps in our row home in Delaware County. My aunt really got charged up like this and started making my sister the clothing, right? And she had, the case. I didn't see the case in the movie, but I didn't want to go see the movie. Now I don't want to go. I was out in Los Angeles visiting my grandkids, and we went. It was hilarious. All the adults were laughing. I was laughing. I knew all the cliches. I knew all the Barbie styles, and I never owned my own Barbie. So I really thought it was fun. I guess I've been to some of these film studies. I'm going to the Better Call Saul again tomorrow night, and I just love listening to the discussions that take place and how much we learn from you guys and look at different insights. So I went to see the movie. It was a lot of fun. I'm not sure whether I thought it had any social redeeming qualities, but I did think about the patriarchy quite a bit. I had some discussions. I'm a teacher, and I had some discussions in the faculty lounge that were really interesting, and that's why I joined on tonight. I would love to hear the comments of how other people thought. It really made me think, and it made me chuckle, but it also made me question. And then, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the mom who's up for the Academy Award, who gave
America
speech.
Ferrera.
Her
Yeah.
her speech gripped me, Andrew, and Jennifer. It gripped me, and I said, she's going to win. She may win an Academy Award for this. It was a powerful speech. A lot of my guy friends, and even a lot of my female friends that did not like the movie or wouldn't even go see it, weren't listening to it. So you got to hear the speech. So that's my little of my thoughts.
Well, thanks very much, John. I'm a little younger than you. My sister had Barbies, and I too am surprised at how many of the things I recognize from never having actually owned any myself, seeing them around the house. But I think probably mostly watching TV on which it was advertised. All that stuff was advertised because they covered all that on the Saturday morning cartoons and such. Yeah, I mean, I guess my if I had to have my single biggest criticism is with the didacticism of the movie. I thought that, I know people love the speech that you referenced that character made, but I I think statements like that have a place. I'm not sure it's within narrative motion pictures. And that's the sort of thing that I take issue with. I take issue with that in all movies. Every time a movie tells me what it's about, let alone tells me like 10 times, I really start to sort of mark it down in my head because it should show me. It shouldn't have to tell me. Jennifer, was there anything John said that brought any thoughts to you?
I feel like what both John and Stephen said is correct, and that I also had a blast when I saw it the first time. And what Stephen was saying about the little pieces of it that stand out, I feel like for me, this is exactly, now I've seen it 3 times. The problem with the movie is that there's all these pieces, like here's the speech moment. Here's the moment where there's the comment to the older woman at the bus stop that she's beautiful. Oh, I like that moment. Here's the Ken's ballet. And I felt like it never kind of comes together in any way that I really grasped it as a whole. And maybe it's because of what you're talking about, like the message points stand out too much so that you can't really conceive of it as an entire piece or something. That's how I felt.
Linda, you're up next.
Gotta unmute. Okay, hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. I have 2 things to mention. One, I thought the movie was entertaining in all the color and the fashions. I found that part intriguing, and it made me want to keep watching. But I didn't understand this Mattel involvement. It seemed to me like that was commercial, and I'm not sure. I guess it's more in the form of a question. How do the rest of you feel about the promotion of Mattel? And I did have Barbie, so I know how Mattel is involved in that. Yeah, I just found that curious. Thanks.
Well, Jennifer, do you want to jump on this one or?
I guess I think at the end of the day, it was always going to be commercial cinema and an advertisement for Mattel. So the best way to go about that from their perspective is to make fun of themselves, which worked really well, right? I kind of like Barbie a little bit more now after I saw it, and I didn't like it at all before. So it kind of does this kind of conversion moment for a lot of us who are critical. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, the movie was never going to not, at the very least, have that big Mattel logo at the beginning, because it's intellectual property. In fact, it's one of the more interesting points about award season that in terms of the screenplay is considered an adapted screenplay. That's the category the Oscars put it in because it's from pre-existing intellectual property with characters that were already created and a world that was created and all of that, which I find very interesting. But so point is Mattel owns all that intellectual property, so they were never not going to be involved. Jennifer's right. It was very smart of them to let them be mocked and undermined and poked. And I will say I was a little bit surprised at the extent to which that occurred in the movie. But I mean, but Jennifer's absolutely right. It got people. I mean, I remember when we were showing this movie and our director of marketing, we had it for so many weeks. Our director of marketing was getting sort of challenged by how many different ways can we sort of describe this movie in our emails? And one of the things she said, whether you love Barbie or you hate Barbie, this movie's for you. And in a sense, that's true. It wasn't just, clever writing. It's actually, there's a real point there. And those of you who saw the movie know that. There's plenty of criticism of Barbie and the industry surrounding it. And, obviously just enough. Then it's obviously also grown their pie bigger. So they made a judgment call and it was the right judgment call. I mean, absolutely. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
It's a little bit like how the Book of Mormon musical, how the LDS Church advertised in the playbill for the Book of Mormon musical, right? You've seen the musical, now read the book. So
I didn't know that.
I mean, there's a way in which a product that's a really funny critique of an institution can nonetheless bring converts to that institution. It's not the first example of that happening.
Right. Susan in the chat says, ask Greta Gerwig met with Mattel leadership. I'm sure that everyone involved at the producer, director, screenwriter level did. And I'm sure that that was, you know, Mattel was incredibly fortunate to get Margot Robbie in the film as the lead and the producer, and Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach as writers, and Greta Gerwig as directors. Like that completely elevated a Barbie movie above what anyone would have guessed, 5 years ago a Barbie movie could have been. It changed who would have seen it. It changed what theaters showed it. It changed how people open their minds to it. So it was brilliant of them to let those people come in and to give them as much latitude as they did. It would be interesting to know what, if any, elements were rejected by them and how those conversations went. But we probably won't know that, at least not for a long time. Gus, you're next. Hey, Gus.
Trying to get it unmuted here.
We got you, Gus. Gus, you there?
Oh, okay. You hear me?
Yeah, we do. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I thought I was still muted. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
I have a complicated response to all this. In one part, I can see where you're saying that it's didactic, especially in America Ferrera's speech. But I also think that there's a complicated movie thematically in a lot of ways. I thought the opening was really interesting because it was, what we were considered in literature called mock epic, which is that, here we are doing this great evolutionary takeoff, and it's supposed to be, oh, this is how Barbie, advanced, for girls, the doll, but it really didn't. That was the whole point, I think, of that theme, because really the doll that then, kind of emerged into all these different types of Barbies wasn't genuine, because it was still manufactured by men who just wanted these different versions to pay, tokenism to it. And I thought the whole film was a kind of like a way of getting away from that, where, the tokenism becomes more rounded and valid. So I did not find it to be, as forthright, didactic, as that one speech. But I do agree with the idea that was said here that I don't think it was focused. I think the film had too many things going on, and it was overpacked. So that, we're talking about guys, they're just accessories in the Barbie world. Then they come into the real world, and then they just become macho. But then they go back, and then they learn, well, we all genders have to be, respected. I think it overcomplicated itself, and I think it lost focus. And that's why I can't agree with my wife and my daughter, who absolutely loved it. I admired a lot of parts of it. I do think Greta Gerwig, did a pretty good job trying to put it together. But I think it was overthought. I think it was, I think she should have been a little more focused in what she was trying to say.
All right. Thanks, Gus. Jennifer, your thoughts?
I think he's right. I mean, it's true that what you pointed out, Andrew, that speech is really didactic, but if you try to get to what the message of the movie actually is, compare that speech to the comment that gets made about mothers later near the very end of the movie, like mothers stand still so that our daughters can see how far we've come. That's a strange message to have in a movie about empowering mothers. It seems like then we just have to stay here and do nothing. And why is my identity based on being a mother, when the speech earlier was all about how we have all kinds of identities that women ought to be able to attain. And then the speech to Will Ferrell is like, how about normal Barbie, right? Maybe Barbie can be a mom. Maybe she could not be a mom. Maybe she can be president and a mom, or not a mom. Like, it seemed like all these possibilities were available, but then later we get told mothers stand still so our daughters can see how far they've come. I want to keep going. I don't want to stand still. So I do feel like a lot of the messages kind of become contradictory at some points.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the America Ferrera speech is the biggest example of didacticism, but I think the movie has it in tons of places. And that's really, that's really the issue. I think that the didacticism is sometimes handled with a lot of humor, like when all the sort of asides Ken has about liking horses and trucks and why
Yeah.
can't he have a horse shaped like a truck or whatever and all that stuff like that makes a point, but it's funny. But I do think I think the film tackles a lot. And I think it has, I mean, it tackles a lot because think of all the people who have to get an apology at the end, right? Ugly Barbie has to get an apology, and Ken has to get an apology, and the mother and daughter have to apologize to each other. And so, I mean, that gives you an idea that there were so many lessons to be learned. And that's a lot. I mean, I agree that if you think about all that's in there and you think about the world and the worlds depicted, I think I'm surprised it's as cohesive as it is, even though it's not very cohesive. And I do think the balancing of all those disparate tones is something that Gerwig deserves credit for, as well as do the actors. Marianne, you have a comment.
Yes, I really, really, really like Barbie. Like about 20 feet from where I'm sitting, I do have my original Barbie case still.
Wow. Cool.
So full disclosure. I really saw this more as a statement or a portrayal of somebody having like an existential crisis, an identity crisis. And I also thought for me, it was important that I watch the documentary. I think it's called Tiny Shoulders. That had such a big impact on me, and I believe that they must have watched it before they wrote this movie. And if anybody hasn't seen it, I recommend that they check that out because that's where Mattel really gets called out for the stereotypical, unrealistic figure that Barbie has. And so they go over that in the documentary and they take this big risk and they make like a full figure version of Barbie. And so I see a direct springboard from the documentary for this movie. The other thing that was fascinating to me was I have had two daughters, both of whom have had different relationships with Barbie. The younger one didn't want Barbie. She wanted a series of dolls called Bratz. So
Oh,
the
yeah.
Bratz, do you know the Bratz dolls?
Oh, yes, yes.
So they were like, if we all thought that Barbie was problematic for girls, Bratz just took that concern to a greater level. They just were just so fraught with stereotypes. Like their shoes didn't come off, their feet snapped off, and they had tons of makeup on. And so what I realized is the scene where Barbie shows up at the middle school and she's approaching that table in the cafeteria and she's stopped by a girl and she's like, no, you do not want to talk to them. Well, the writers gave the daughter, America Ferrera's daughter, and all those girls at that table were the names of the Bratz dolls.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
So I thought that was such a powerful moment, and like you had to really kind of be tuned into the whole toy doll scene to kind of get that. But I felt really kind of rewarded as, the viewer of this film, that they put the whole conflict between Bratz and Barbies in there in a very discreet way. The other thing that I was struck by was when she's running away from the corporate executives and she stumbles into that floor where she meets Ruth Handler. And of course, she's no idea who Ruth Handler is. And there's Ruth Handler seeing her creation still in existence. And there's this one shot where she hands her the tea, and the entire screen is just her handing her the tea, and the way it's lit and the angles and all, it's like right from the Sistine Chapel. I think it's called is it called the Hand of God?
Okay,
I
yeah,
don't know what it's called, but I know what you mean.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I was really touched by that it was kind of like, here is the creator, reaching down and, having that moment, handing the tea to her creation. So
That's a beautiful comment. I mean, I like the idea that that's then a reworking of that in a maternal way instead of the original. It's quite beautiful. And what you're saying about the Bratz characters' names in the middle school scene is interesting because one of the more surprising moments in that film, I think, was that one, that schoolers and especially Sasha have this ability to articulate exactly what they find wrong with capitalist products and their representation of women. And of course, it's not a very realistic, it's another didactic moment. It's not a realistic speech that an eighth grader or a seventh grader would probably be likely to give. But the fact that she does it anyway, I think is fantastic because of course, representations of middle school are not usually so positive, and the girls represented in them are usually much more fraught with each other. And we get the hint that Sasha's going to be that way too. And then she kind of overcomes that and is able to take her critique into Barbie land itself. So it's kind of nice.
And Steve has put in the chat some information about that painting, and I will send it to everyone. I'm not sure Steve's message can be seen by everyone. So there we go. Yeah, I mean, I found both of those observations very interesting and insightful, and I hadn't really thought, whenever I see a movie and I think about, we should all do this, right? You see something on screen that seems like an intentional choice of a shot, and you sort of say to yourself, why are we getting a close-up of that? I should have thought more about it. Marianne, you elucidated why that shot was in there. I think you make a very good point. And the Bratz thing, I had no idea of knowing. That's very interesting as well. Are there any other questions or comments? Boy, it's so funny. See, this is what happens when you plan things far in advance. We thought people would be talking about this movie and have lots of opinions, but it turns out there's basically two sets of opinions, and people are in one camp or the other, and that's about that.
I feel like
there we go. Oh, Jennifer, what were you going to say?
No, I was just thinking more about Marianne's comment about the comparison to the creation of man, because I mean, it feels almost like, does this make then Barbie land the Garden of Eden, right? Which should be this ideal, perfect place. But of course, it's actually totally imperfect for the humanity of the characters in them. And then what is that commenting back upon the Garden of Eden and a biblical tale and its representation of humanity? So do we need a kind of idea about a first sin in order for Barbie to emerge into the world and into herself? And would we really call that a sin for her to recognize thoughts of death? And the comparison then, I feel like, leads us to ask larger theological questions. But call on the next person.
Well, but it's also treated, I mean, it's treated like a sin when it first occurs, right? It's like the most appalling thing any of those other characters had heard. So in that sense, it is sort of treated that way. Jeff, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
I wonder just how much of the acclaim that it's getting in the Oscars is just built on hype. I really liked Ryan Gosling's part in it, and but I'm really surprised he got an Academy Award nomination, and that this movie is. Did the movie get a Best Picture nomination?
Yeah, but they expanded it to up to 10 movies, so it's
right.
that nomination is a little devalued, but yes, it did.
I mean, I'm just surprised. It doesn't seem like an Academy Award kind of movie, but they expanded it from 5 to 10. And I just wonder, they did such a good job advertising, so much so that my 9-year-old daughter, so many of her friends went to see it over the summer, which like makes no sense to me, but they just kind of got caught up in it. If you're a 9-year-old watching this movie, I just wonder what you're kind of getting out of it. And then the question I have is, once the hype all kind of settles down after the Oscars, and I don't know, 10 years from now, how does this movie look? Does it seem like is it forgotten? Is it seen as like kind of an Oscar nomination mistake? It just seems to be, there seems to be so much momentum behind it, but I wonder about its true, I don't know, its true value.
I mean, I do think it's an interesting question to wonder about, you know, how, if at all, people will be think. I mean, you know, we show classic movies at BMFI all the time. Is this one we're going to trot back out in 10 or 15 years, and that, you know, we're going to do a seminar on in the summer because people love to see it and also find it so interesting? It's a good question, and time will tell. I think it's another good reminder, of course, about what the Academy Awards are, which is they're by the industry and they're for the industry, and they have to basically, they have a lot to do with what the industry wants to say about itself. And this movie very much aligns with the sorts of things the industry wants to say about itself. And I think that's part of the reason it was getting it got the recognition it did. Jennifer, thoughts on those other comments?
I mean, I think I'm going to be teaching a class with a colleague called Film and Psychoanalysis next semester, and I think we're going to use it there to talk about fantasy and projection and the mirror stage and the construction of gender. So I think it's useful in a lot of ways and probably will continue to be so. But I think Jeff's question is decent, and that one could do that same work with Singing in the Rain or Bandwagon or any kind of other Hollywood musical that has a big glitz and glitter and traditional gender roles, and undo them with psychoanalysis. So I don't know. We have to just check. Wait 10 years and we'll find out.
Right. Stephen, you have a question or comment?
I don't know if you can hear me.
We can, yes.
Okay, I've got a really old computer. I'm gonna do the best I can. I'm very bad at communicating, so please bear with me. I really like the daughter complaining to Barbie about Barbie having unrealistic standards. I assume especially for physical traits of various sorts. So if you're saying that shouldn't be in the movie, well then I don't think they'd have a movie. The thing though I would hope is Barbie would complain back and saying, hey, I'm the best person I can be, or I'm trying to be a better person. And you know, inevitably some people will like me and some people will hate me. And so, you know, I hear what you're saying, but you know, if I was fatter, people complain about that. If I was not blonde, people complain about that. What I'm trying to say is that hopefully the idea I thought in movies is the main character have some kind of arc or be a better person at the end of the movie. I don't see, other than being Barbie being human, that Barbie's actually changed or trying to improve herself. So I would hope again that that's what I would see. But I don't know if you people, because you're the established people know about movies, have any comments about that. As far as I said, one, I understand you want to preach to the choir that's not good in movies, but on the other hand, you know, by having Barbie, it's a loaded question. Barbie has people that like it for various reasons, don't like it for various reasons, and you might as well hit the nail on the head. So if you want to comment on that,
Well, thanks, Stephen. Jennifer, did you have thoughts on Stephen's comments?
I feel like he's asking an interesting question, because I think you could compare it to something like Pinocchio. So there's a film or a story about a little boy who isn't a little boy, who wants to be real. And yet at the beginning of that, he's quite selfish. He does whatever he wants. He doesn't care about others. And his transformation has to do with, you know, becoming good as a result of becoming less selfish and making better choices. So does Barbie similarly, in her transformation into becoming a better person, make better choices? Or is it just that to become human is to inherently confront the existential crisis, as somebody else said, about what it means to be alive, and that itself is a story arc that's rewarding? And I kind of feel like it's that. I don't know. What do you think, Andrew?
I mean, I think she does change. I mean, she apologizes to Ugly Barbie for calling her Ugly Barbie. She apologizes to Ken for it always being girls' night and sort of taking him for granted and being so dismissive of him. So, you know, she does change. And in fact, you know, the end of the film, she becomes a real woman, right? Like Pinocchio wants to become a real boy, she becomes a real woman. And so to want to do that suggests growth, I think, realizing that you don't get to enjoy the heights of emotional reward and intellectual stimulation and creativity without also experiencing the depths of pain and discomfort and whatever that people do. And she's willing to take the bad with the good, which suggests growth to me. In fact, I think the point that she's even sort of asking those questions and then acts on those questions. I mean, because she's given a choice, right? I mean, she's not really given a choice, right? Yeah. Ugly Barbie gives her the choice, but it's not really a choice. I'm sorry, Weird Barbie. I'm sorry, right. Weird Barbie, right. Weird Barbie gives her the choice, and she initially tries to take the choice where things go back to being the way they were. And Weird Barbie won't let her. But eventually she embraces the choice she was sort of forced to make toward the beginning. So I think that says something that suggests growth to me, and I think that's there.
Here's the thing that's so fascinating about it. Cinematically, it's as if the film undermines its own production. At the moment where she becomes human, what we are seeing in her feelings is this footage shot by crew members of their own families, right? Low res footage taken on camcorders is the thing that we feel, the thing that makes us into people. And yet this entire film is not that, but a very expensive Hollywood product shot with very expensive actors. So it's almost like the film itself is suggesting to be human is not to enjoy things like this, but rather to feel that kind of authentic material footage taken on our own of the people closest to us.
That's a really interesting point. Henry, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, several. First, in terms of thinking about these from performance standpoint and the issue of snubs and accolades, I walked out of the film thinking that Ryan Gosling would be nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Had to be, because it was just such a nuanced and such a clever performance. So I felt that too. With respect to Margot Robbie and snubs, I felt she did a magnificent job in Babylon. And I don't think there was even any mention, not in this film, of course, but I mean, in terms of, I don't think she was nominated. She was not nominated. And there was not a lot of critical response, to my knowledge, to her performance in Babylon, which I thought was extraordinary from the point of view of Best Actress. And third, I wonder about another aspect. Was there a gay subtext in this film that has gone unacknowledged and not talked about in the critical commentary, and what you might think about that? Because I felt that there was potentially that theme there as well, a juxtaposition not only of stereotypical maleness, but also of a gay idealization that might have emerged from that film as well.
Well, thanks, Henry. Jennifer, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the film is easily identified as camp, at least from a contemporary perspective. So if you're going to think about what is camp, this kind of excessive performativity in which people try just a little bit too hard, that would be Ryan Gosling's performance, and Simu Liu's who I really enjoyed, the other main Ken. And so their relationship with each other, which I think is what you're hinting at, definitely it's not overtly, we're not supposed to believe that they are gay within the world in which they're living, but the way in which they are glitzy and dress beautifully and have this dance number with all of the Kens reads as camp to me, which is traditionally thought of in that vein. So yeah, of course.
Yeah, I agree. I think the film's definitely open to those readings. I think it doesn't go into it, with any to any definitive degree. I think for a couple of reasons. I think one is we've already all talked about how many things are going on in the movie, and that would have been a whole other can of worms. Another is I think that it complicates the patriarchy and related messages that the film is trying to put out. And I think another might be that I think there's been a lot. I think there was a Toy Story 4. There's one of the Toy Stories where Michael Keaton voices Ken, and I think that's sort of a subtext in that as well. And so maybe they didn't want to sort of go down that road because it had already been touched upon, a bit more directly, although not, it's a Toy Story movie, so not directly at all, than it is in this movie. Jennifer, we got a comment in the chat from Mike, who asked, wants us to comment on the movie, on Barbie commenting on other movies. Certainly there's 2001, obviously, at the beginning. There's the mansplaining of The Godfather. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Do you not think these are usually the films that get the most attention from men as being quality cinema, The Godfather and anything by Kubrick? So I think that's probably why.
Yeah, I mean, The Godfather certainly does. I mean, if there's a movie that is, I mean, that's the thing in and you've got mail, right? Tom Hanks can't believe Meg Ryan's never seen it, and she doesn't understand why men are so into it. And so it's definitely like the most, like the ostensibly sort of, you know, middle to upper brow film that is sort of thought of as the most, you know, man associated. I think the 2001 thing, I think that might be part of it. I also think, though, it was very clever to completely let us know what kind of movie this was going to be from the very beginning. This is a movie that is smart. This is a movie that knows that we're skeptical of it, and it's going to talk to us directly, but perhaps more intelligence and cleverness than we might expect. And so I think it was a smart choice. I mean, there's no way you could have put it into the narrative, of course, but it's also smart because of what it says about preparing the audience for the movie that's about to come, I think.
I have two things to say about what you just said before we call on Marianne, which we really have to do. But first, there's a kind of weird incoherence, isn't there? I mean, I love the opening bit and its play on 2001, but the girls smash their baby dolls because they don't want to be told that they only have roles as mothers. And yet what the film kind of goes on to do is to assert, at least in America Ferrera's role, and then the desire to, you know, represent humanity as having children, which is what most of that camcorder footage near the end is, that motherhood is in fact the most important thing. And this really felt like a movie for mothers. So I felt that that was kind of a strange match, and I wonder what people think about it. And then the other thing that I found so fascinating, I've already completely forgotten. I'm sorry. I'll just stick with that one and call him Marianne.
No, but that's a good contradiction to point out.
I remember what it was. It's weird that the Barbies don't have, like, it could have been possible to contrast the making fun of Godfather in 2001 with some like maybe awesome feminist films that the Barbies end up liking. Like there could have been a Jean Dillman play or something like that, you know, like, wow, great feminist filmmaking from the 70s now can have a place in Barbie land. I mean, they do have the Indigo Girls as kind of a theme
right.
they choose, but it's musical. So I kind of wondered about that too.
Well, but I mean, I would imagine the response to that would be part of our point is that there's no feminist film that has entered the popular consciousness to the degree that those two movies have. And that's part of the problem, right? That's what what the answer is.
Yeah, you're right.
Marianne.
So I wanted to speak to the comment about gay representation, or, you know, how that was not apparent, or they didn't have any direct references to it. I found again that it was embedded and there was a lot of subtext. So Weird Barbie was played by an openly gay actor, you know, Kate McKinnon. I thought she did an amazing job. The other thing that I found fascinating about Weird Barbie was how many people had a Weird Barbie. And how universally recognizable that whole phenomenon was of somebody just getting a bit too creative, you know, with changing the doll's appearance. And then everybody that hung out with Weird Barbie was in some way, shape, or form was part of a queer representation. Including that very strange version of the Ken doll. There was the sparkly earring one, and then there was one who
Sugar Daddy.
There you go. So I did see that there was representation there, but again, it was kind of you had to be looking for it. You had to be able to recognize, hey, that's a trans woman, you know, playing that Barbie. So yeah, a lot of the representation was kind of there if you knew what you were looking for. And also too, the song, the Indigo Girls song, and the guys song too, it has nothing to do with gay representation, but I just thought it was so hilarious that they used Push by Matchbox for the song that the guys would sing over and over again.
Totally.
Yeah, no.
Great choice.
Yeah, it was. It totally was.
I think in the idea that what you just said about Weird Barbie and the comment that they make within the film, and that it's true for all of us, that everybody had a Weird Barbie, also suggests the level at which gender play is inherent to what it means to be a child. And that we do this with our dolls, and we do it with dressing up and all kinds of other things, which goes to your point.
And the choice of the Birkenstock, which is kind of like it when in my day it was standard issue for, you know, feminists or for gay women. That was like the shoe of choice. So the Barbie either had the choice of the high heel or the Birkenstock, I thought was also hinting in that direction as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's also about, I mean, I would imagine about as far on the other side of the comfort spectrum as you could get. Never having worn a heel like that, I don't know for sure, but certainly I'm guessing. And as Barbie says, Barbie actually says at one point, you know, it's really hard to wear these when you're, you know, when you have flat feet or what, you know, something like that. Why would anyone wear these if they had, you know, flat feet or whatever? So yeah, no, it's just things like that were very very clever. Like it's almost like on a micro level, there was a lot of intelligence and thought and cleverness, and it's just sort of when you sort of pull back, there's a lot going on, and it has to be in some ways didactic to sort of try to contain it all or communicate it all.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
I also thought that it was interesting when it came time for getting a solution, because they were not able, the main characters were not able to see how to solve the dilemma from the perspectives that they were immersed in, that they had to go to Weird Barbie. So they had to kind of leave where they were and go to this place and hang out with somebody that was ostracized and just, you know, with all the other potentially odd characters that hung out with Weird Barbie. And they were the ones that knew the lay of the land. And they were the ones that said, well, here's the solution. Here's how you get the dream house back. Here's how you get the Kens, you know, subdued.
Well, and that's, you know, we talked earlier about the movie references, and the thing you just mentioned, Marianne, is a more implicit one. That idea of the sort of the outside figure who sort of occupies a liminal space. You know, it's in Westerns, it's the Western hero, and that person, you know, does the things they have to do. It's Shane or it's John Wayne in The Searchers. They do the things that have to be done, but they can't then enjoy the fruits of what they've preserved because they're not exactly, they're enough of the society to help it or care about it, but they're not enough of it to be fully embraced by it. And that's what Weird Barbie is. And she's of that world, but because she's been isolated, she has enough of a distance to be able to make sense of it and figure it out. It's like why so many great comedians are Canadian. It's because they're right near America and they have great insight about it, but they're not actually American. So they have that necessary distance and critical eye.
I feel like it's also important to go with what Marianne said, that Weird Barbie not only has the maps, but she built like a miniature of Barbie Land in her own. And she makes a point of saying that I built this, right, at one point. So she can see clearly the lay of the land literally because she produces it in her own house. I really like the comparison to the Western hero, of course, because of the horses, but it's as if all the Kens have latched on to signifiers of the Western. Here's horses, or here's beers, or whatever it is, like, but without grasping the whole.
Saloon doors.
Yeah. And Barbies have latched on to signifiers of femininity without grasping the whole. And you exactly need what Marianne said, that person in the in-between space, in order to bring it all together and make sense of the structural critique.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered the bases, and I thank everyone for joining us. No one do I thank more for joining us than you, Jennifer. Thank you for your time tonight and for your insightful introduction as well, which if you're in the discussion and you haven't seen it, it's still available on our website. You can see on screen a number of the upcoming education opportunities we have. There's a lot going on, and these courses and seminars have been selling out. So I would encourage you to check them out on our website, brynmarfilm.org, and register early. For example, we have Jennifer teaching one on bringing up baby this week that has sold out. So those things are happening, but you can still go to the movie if you want to. These are the new films we have playing and coming up very soon. And I mentioned earlier that if you want to know when our next discussion is and what it's going to be, you can sign up for our emails, specifically our Thursday education emails. And in that email this Thursday, we will let you know what our next film will be for our online discussion next month. And until that happens, please keep us in mind. Come see a movie, come take a class, join if you're not a member, or support us in any way you see fit. We do what we do for you all, but we can't do what we do without you all. So please continue to support us as you all have wonderfully. Gus, did you mean to raise your hand? I guess not. All right.
It was an error.
Okay, well, thanks, Gus. You often, when you came to our Monday class, you always had a great comment at the end. So I thought maybe this was that, but no pressure. Thanks very much for joining us, everybody. Thank you, Jennifer. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.